Welcome to Spirits Podcast, a boozy dive into mythology, legends, and folklore. Every week we pour a drink and learn about a news story from around the world. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Julia.
And new year, new us, new episode structure. We are jumping right into the episode. You'll hear our checking in, our recommendations for books and movies and podcasts to listen to, and all of the other stuff that we have to say in the middle of the episode in our refill break. So without further ado, Julia, let's jump into episode 265, Demeter.
Well, Amanda, I'm going to invite you to come on a journey with me, right? So close your eyes, and I want you to picture yourself in the ancient Greek countryside.
I look great with a toga. Okay.
You do. Oh my God, absolutely. Love it. There are these rolling hills and mountains. You have these fields of green and gold with the cerulean sea beyond. But in the hills of Greece, you will come across another type of golden field waving in the breeze. And that is a field of wheat and cereals.
I love cereals, Julia. Bread's my favorite food.
I know, bread's so good. I feel bad for people who can't eat gluten. I understand. I have many family members who are gluten intolerant, but man, bread's so good.
Bread's good. Cereals are good. I'm in it. I'm here. I'm smelling the breeze.
Well, Amanda, these fields of cereals were central to this week's goddess, Demeter. So for the Greeks, via Edith Hamilton, the first cornfield was the beginning of settled life on Earth. That was the quote from Edith Hamilton. I love that. And just for some context, when we talk about Demeter, who is referred to in the theogony as the corn mother, when we're talking about corn, we're not talking about like corn on the cob or maize as we understand it, because obviously Europe in the time of the ancient Greeks didn't know what that type of corn was. So when they say corn, they're basically referring to cereals and grains in general.
Gotcha.
So if I mention corn, I'm not talking about corn on the cob, I'm talking about like wheat.
And sounds like classic Europe to apply a word that they know to a species that it is not when they encounter the US.
Yep, that feels right. So I really like Edith Hamilton's reasoning behind why Demeter was the goddess of agriculture rather than a god. So she says, the care of the fields belonged to the women, and as they plowed and scattered the seed and reaped the harvest, they felt that a woman divinity could best understand and help a woman's work. They could best understand her too, who was worshipped not like other gods by bloody sacrifices men liked, but in every humble act that made the farm fruitful.
Lovely.
Isn't that beautiful? I love
it.
That.
It is.
A lot of times when we think of, I guess in America, and I think of like farming in the like Dust Bowl and stuff like that in kind of rural America, it's very masculine. But I do love the idea of ancient Greece, the fields belong to women.
I think that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Also, what I really like is the fact that it was described that while Demeter had like actual temples and stuff, any field of grain or threshing floor was considered her temple as well, where she might be found at any moment.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't that beautiful?
That really is.
I like the idea of any home could be made a temple to the goddess.
Absolutely. And I'm sure a quite repetitive and kind of humdrum task of, threshing grain and caring for fields and once again walking the many, many, linear feet of wheat that you have to, pick over can be a little bit holy, a little bit meditative.
Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who I find a lot of solace in repetitive tasks because I can kind of just turn my brain off and just do the things and let my hands take care of it, I definitely feel a connection there.
Totally.
So she was also described by the poets as Demeter of the corn-ripe yellow hair, which I think is a really evocative description for her worshippers. I think that's just really beautiful.
What is the Inn of the Woods line? Hair is yellow as gold.
A cow is white as milk, a cape is red as blood, a hair is yellow as corn, a slipper is pure as gold. There it is.
There you go.
So we could use her to make a potion.
Indeed.
Also very important to her divinity, she was the goddess of sacred law, as well as being associated with the cycle of life and death, which we will talk about a lot more later. But we've talked about her role as the mother goddess when we have spoken about her relationship with Persephone in the past. And she, to clarify, is not our understanding of like Mother Earth. So that would be Gaia, who was the personification of the earth in Greek mythology and also the mother of the Titans.
Which I think makes total sense because agriculture isn't the same as nature. It's a human relationship to making land work for us as opposed to like the land, in capital letters.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that is also kind of what begs the difference. Like when they first kind of introduced Persephone into the mythology, she is more the like cultivation of nature. So like not agriculture exactly, but also not just wildly nature. She is kind of the middle ground. Like we'll talk about this later, but when Persephone was stolen away by Hades, she was tasked with painting all of the flowers in the world, which I think is adorable and beautiful. And I love that so much. So let's talk about Demeter's names and titles, which has become one of my favorite sections in doing It's All Greek to Me. So Demeter is also known as Dio, which seems to derive from the Cretan word dia or the Ionic zea, which are various terms for grains like spelt and rye.
Really? I was going to assume that it was something holy, like Dios, meaning God.
That I think is more of the Latin origin, if I'm remembering correctly. I might be wrong. I am not a...
Probably right.
Entomologist?
Etymologist. Entomologist is bugs.
That is bugs. Yeah, I was like, I always confuse those two. One of them's bugs. I know one of them's bugs.
One has an N in the middle, like the word ant. Ent and ant.
That is a great way of remembering it. Thank you, Amanda.
There you go. I only know, Julia, because I did once sign up for an etymology class and instead landed in an entomology class.
Oh, no. And then the professor who was teaching the etymology class was like, well, now you know. He's like, this is the first rule of etymology.
Haha, that was the first test.
Yeah, you went to the bug class instead. That's very funny. I love that. So as the goddess of agriculture, she was, as I mentioned before, referred to as the corn mother, but also in Cyprus, she was called Demeter or the grain harvester, which I really like. In this form, her symbol was the poppy, which would often grow among the barley in the field, and she was said to help crops grow full and strong.
Delightful.
She was also worshipped as a goddess of the earth beyond the fields. In Arcadia in particular, a version of her prior to the ancient Greek version showed her as a snake-haired woman and gave her power over not only the earth, but also the underworld, the air, and the water, which was symbolized by her animals, the dove and the dolphin.
I mean, two animals. Okay, my first reaction is, what do those boys have in common? But I kind of get it. They're both like noble and beautiful, more so than their like relatives.
No, I agree. Yeah. A dolphin, like, you see a dolphin in real life and you're like, I can't believe that's a real animal, you know?
Yeah, you did post on Christmas, by the way, something that someone submitted to the Spirits Instagram at Spirits Podcast. Remember, reindeer are real, narwhals are fake, which I read and chortled, and then 5 minutes later was like, wait, that was the opposite. So you got me. You got me.
I mean, reindeers are also real. It's just that they don't fly. We've covered this on the podcast before.
I know.
So she was also referred to as Anisdora, which means one who sends gifts from the underworld.
Oh, like roots?
Like roots. I like that.
My favorite.
The Spartans tied her to the dead, and the Athenians sometimes called their dead the Demetrioi, which like kind of links her and death and growth because new life would sprout from the dead body just as new plants arise from buried seed, which I think is beautiful.
Oh, Julia, my absolute shit.
Yeah. And it's also like, that makes her the goddess of compost. I love that. She's the goddess of compost.
My building just got composting 2 weeks ago, and it was the most exciting event to happen to me. Maybe not all year. I did get engaged this year, but like at least in the last 2 months.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
No, I'm so excited. We went to go visit my this is a total sidebar. We went to go visit my cousin the other day who lives in Connecticut. And I was like, do you guys have recycling? And they're like, yeah. I was like, oh, you guys have recycling. We don't have recycling anymore. And I hate it. I want to recycle things so badly.
Bad.
Oh, God, no. But goddess of compost. I love that.
Love it.
The poet Pindar says it best, actually, in reference to that. He says, happy is he who has seen what exists under the earth, because he knows not only the end of life, but also the beginning of what the gods will give.
I couldn't agree more, Pindar. Yes.
Fuck yeah, Pindar. I love that.
I love it.
Oh, God, it's just... She's so good. I love my mom so much. My mom, the earth. I love her.
I love my mom, Demeter, too. I gave a talk recently about like making a career in new media and like having a career like doing podcasting and stuff. And the quote that I opened with is from the magazine Modern Farmer. And I was like, is this the first time anyone's opened a media talk with a quote from Modern Farmer? Maybe. I'm the first. And so the quote is that real farmers grow soil, not crops, because in monitoring the health and vitamins and resiliency of your soil, like that is more than half the battle in growing crops. And that's what, farmers kind of pay attention to in this person's estimation.
Yeah.
And I think that is so true. The plant is the result. It is not the act. And I love when people draw attention to that.
Yeah, there is so much like actual science that goes behind farming. This is going to be the, hey, we love farming section of the podcast. Farmers are great.
Hey, farmers, get in touch. Like, tag us, show us your pics. You all know how much I love my plant watches, but like truly making it all happen.
You are, truly. We love farmers on this podcast. And I know Demeter loves you guys too. Shout out.
Hell yeah.
Here's a couple more of the epithets that I love for Demeter. So first of all, did you know that Chloe is one of them?
No, why?
It is. It just means green. So it refers to her ability of like ever returning fertility.
Oh my God.
Chloe.
We really grew up at a time where Chloe was like the sort of popular girl name when we were in middle school, I thought.
I recently was Googling like most popular names for Gen Z folks.
Oh, really?
Yes, because I was trying to pick out a good character for our Join the Party spinoff.
Yeah.
And I chose Chloe because it was like number 16 for Gen Zers. Name
That's very
to be
good.
named. Like, it's wild.
That's very good.
I love the name Chloe, actually. I'm a big fan of it. And now Demeter, also Chloe. She is also known as Thesmophorus, or the giver of customs or legislator, which is particularly related to a festival that we're going to talk about a little bit later on the show. She's also known as Agnipi, which is the mare who destroys mercifully, which is incredible. And also, as we know, horses are one of her holy creatures because she was given the first horse by Poseidon.
Sure was.
They also translate it to nightmare, but I know that we like literally get the phrase nightmare from a Germanic pagan god, but I love this so much. It's so good.
Horse mom.
Sometimes they have a lot of scary titles depending on what god it is. This is her only like scary title. She's also known as Eula, which means like related to corn, which is great. And also is known as Carpophorus, or fruit bearing. And like I mentioned before, she was also the goddess of sacred laws under the title of Thesmia.
Mm-hmm.
Which I love.
I hear any word that sounds like thespian and I'm like, me.
Yes, that's me. For a really long time, I still got that Thespian Society newsletter. I don't think I get it anymore, but
I really honestly expected more to happen in my life when I was elected president of our Thespian Society. I was like, yes.
This is the moment.
The rest of my life on track. Yes, surely I'm going to go to conferences and meet others. Never did.
No. Probably because they made it happen just your senior year and there was nothing to do after that.
Yeah, that's true.
We've talked about on the show at least one lover and one child of Demeter. We talked about her relationship with Poseidon in our Poseidon episodes and their children, which includes the talking horse.
Sure does.
We've also talked about Persephone before, but we'll revisit that one a little bit later. But Demeter did take on other lovers and bore other children. So the first I'll mention is Ixion, who was the son of Electra, a nymph, and Zeus. The two of them actually met at the wedding of Cadmus and Harmonia, and Demeter kind of lured him away from the celebrations, and then the two had sex in the field that had just freshly been plowed.
Okay. I mean, listen, if the smell of compost makes her feel at home, then I'm all for it.
I was going to say, people get real sexy at weddings and, want to get it down. And Demeter is no exception.
They do. And also the smell of freshly tilled earth, there's something to it.
There's something to that. When they returned to the party, Zeus, who was a lover of Demeter, saw that Demeter had mud on her back. And in his jealousy, he struck down Ixion with his thunderbolt.
Ah, piss.
Yes. But their union, however, resulted in two twins who are Plutus and Philamelas. Plutus became the god of wealth and was the bearer of one of his mother's symbols, which is the cornucopia, or the horn of plenty.
Incredible.
I love the cornucopia. Every year I make one out of breadsticks for Thanksgiving, and it's great.
At some point, I want to make some Great British Baking ass sculpture to do with cornucopia bread situation.
Man, I can just imagine how beautiful that would be. I love that. Meanwhile, his brother Philamelas was the god of animal husbandry as well as plowing the fields. So it was said that Plutus, because he was the god of wealth, was obviously the wealthier of the two, but he was kind of conceited and he never shared his riches with his twin.
Sure.
You got to share with your siblings. That's like rule number one, I think. You would know better than me. I'm an only child.
Especially twins. Twins are going to have some kind of fraught relationship to sharing.
Because they have to share everything. I feel bad about that.
Exactly.
So never shared his riches, but Philamelas, out of necessity, he bought 2 oxen and he invented the wagon and was able to support himself by basically inventing plowing and cultivating crops.
Damn.
Which I love that. So his mother, out of admiration for her son's basically industriousness, placed him in the heavens as the plowman constellation that's known as Bohotes.
That's a pretty great, eternal gift.
Imagine your offspring does so well that you're like, you're going to be a constellation now, bud. I'm proud of you.
I know.
So another lover, as I mentioned, was her brother Zeus. And there isn't much description of their courtship that I could find in the myths, but the most important aspect of their relationship was the birth of their daughter Persephone. Though, as a side note, and I love like little side notes where the poets disagree with each other, but there is a Orphic fragment of the story of Persephone's conception, which says that Zeus had sex with his mother Rhea in the form of a snake. And then after that, Rhea gave birth to Persephone. And in that story, Rhea is transformed into the goddess Demeter after giving birth to Persephone.
Fascinating.
Yeah, which it's definitely like odd in the grand scheme of Greek mythology, but because this is lost and also an Orphic tradition, which we don't have a lot of, it doesn't usually align with what we consider the Greek canon. It doesn't seem to have been accepted as much by the Greek poets.
Totally. And like, there's so much we can't know, right? Like, people could have been kidding. It could have been a metaphor. It could have been, like all this is metaphor and allegory for lots of different meanings. So I don't know. I think it's fun to really think about, people did this for a reason. Sort of, what were the reasons? Like, it's not ever that we're saying like, how stupid. It's saying like, why was this? What is the meaning? What is the departure from what was known already? Like, what is the purpose?
Yeah. Trying to remember if the Orphic traditions are like pre-Greek poets or post-Greek poets. And if it's like, they were just like, we're going to put our own spin on this, or I heard it different,
People are always in dialogue with what is around them and what has come before them and what they want and think might happen after. And, I'm sure most of these poets, some of them were probably having grandiose thinking of like, they'll be reading me hundreds of years after my death. Many of them were probably just fucking around.
Yeah.
And so it is so interesting to me to read about, that's why I love like historical context so much around these texts, because it's like, did you think that people 2,000 years from now would be, reading it and kind of wondering and saying like, was that weird for you? It's a little weird for me, but let's dig into the weirdness. Let's see why.
It's like, oh, why are Pindar and Homer disagreeing on like what Demeter looked like? That's weird.
Yeah.
And it might just be like they were feuding. I love the idea of just like poets feuding if they lived within each other's times. Or even if it's like, I didn't like the way that guy 100 years ago wrote this story, so fuck him, I'm going to write it my own way.
Yeah. No one does this better than rabbis. No one does this better than the Talmud, where it's like, layers and layers and layers and layers of people citing and disagreeing with and feuding with and building on each other. Puts Wikipedia to shame. It's incredible.
I love that. I love that so much. So kind of leaving that, we're going to revisit the story of Persephone and Demeter, but we're going to do that as soon as we get back from our refill.
Let's do it. Julia, welcome to our first, is this an extended refill? Is this like a second round? Is this a catching up in the bathroom, while your dates are back in the bar and like kind of doing a little debrief? That's what this is.
Yeah, this is when you're at a house party and you're refilling your drinks in the kitchen, but you get to talking to someone that you haven't spoken to in a while. And you're like, oh my God, tell me what's going on in your life.
You will always find me in the kitchen at a house party. You'll find both of us there, which is why I love going to parties with you.
I usually sit on the counter. Sorry, host.
No, it's great. And then we're at eye level. It's perfect. So, Julia, in this refill, we're going to do a few things. We're going to thank our patrons. We're going to give our recommendation of what we are reading, watching, and listening to. We'll tell you what else is going on with Multitude, and then we'll get into our sponsors just to give you a little layout, folks listening.
Yeah. So you guys know what to look for.
And this is our first episode of 2022. This is our 7th year of podcasting, Julia. 2022 is year 7 of the show. We're about to hit our 6th anniversary, and this is going to be year 7 of the show. So we would not be doing this as our jobs. This would not be our career. We could not afford to put, time and research and effort into making the show as good as possible for you, if not for our patrons. And so that is why we thank them every dang week. That is why you can go to patreon.com/spiritspodcast to sign up for as little as $1 per episode and make your little bit of money each month support us. It adds up. It really does.
It really, really does. And we get to do exciting things like make you recipe cards for every episode. If you sign up now, you're going to get definitely over 500 at this point because we provide both cocktail and mocktail recipes for every single episode.
We sure do. We did appetizers as well. We did recipes at the beginning, and now we do all kinds of like outtakes and bloopers. There is 6 years of stuff for you to enjoy in the Patreon, and by becoming a member, you get access to the entire back catalog. So thank you very much to Toph Beifong, I recognize that name, and Ambi Quaffula, who became patrons recently, as well as those clutch supporting producer level patrons, Alicia Hannah, Jack Marie, Jane, Jessica Kinzer, Jessica Stewart, Measelkins, Megan Moon, Phil Fresh, Captain Jonathan, Malachi Cosmos, Sarah Scott and Zazie, and our legend level patrons, Audra, Bex, Clara, Drew, J. Bay, Lexus, Mary, Morgan, Mother of Vikings, Sarah, Taylor, and BME of Scotty.
And you can get all that by going to patreon.com/spiritspodcast, where you can get those recipe cards. You can get bonus Urban Legends episodes every month. You can get a bunch of audio extras. It's just, there's a lot there. And trust me when I say it is worth every penny that you can send our way.
Next, Jules, I'm going to ask you what you have been reading, watching, or listening to.
Amanda, I haven't been sleeping well because I have been reading an incredible book that, one, is giving me just like great messed up dreams, like in the best possible way. And also it's just very hard to put down before I go to bed every night. So I end up staying up way late to try to finish more and more chapters. And that is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. And oh my God, Amanda, so good.
So good. Nothing like it.
I found like a new love and appreciation for Gothic literature as a whole. And this just like scratched so many of my like special interest points that I was like, oh, I need to read this book 3 more times, please.
I've seen it recommended almost everywhere I go on the internet, and it deserves to be. It's such a good book. And you can find a link to buy that from an independent bookstore online or near you at spiritspodcast.com/books.
Books.
And also, every single week, we're going to let you know what's going on with Multitude, the podcast collective that Spirits is a founding member of, that I run all day long for my job. And this week, we would like to remind you that Julia and I are on another show here in the Multitude Collective. If you're into passionate people creating shows you can count on, hey, don't stop at Spirits. Listen to Join the Party. This is an actual play D&D podcast with tangible worlds, genre-pushing storytelling, and collaborators who make each other laugh each week, 2 of whom are me and Julia.
That's true.
We welcome everyone to the table on Join the Party, from longtime players to people who've never touched a role-playing game before. So if you're like, I like Amanda and Julia, that's why I'm listening to their voices, I want more of that, then hey, listen to Join the Party.
Yeah, you could start with Campaign 1, which is a dose of classic high fantasy gameplay. Or if you're not into Dungeons or Dragons, you can start with Campaign 2, which has D&D mechanics in a modern superhero-centric setting. It's a lot of fun.
So listen, what are you waiting for? Pull up a chair and join the party. Search for Join the Party in your podcast app or go to jointhepartypod.com.
Yeah.
And now, Julia, to thank the sponsors that also help make the show possible. First, we have a sponsor, Julia, whose Kickstarter I backed more than 10 years ago.
Wow.
This is Beta Brand. They make comfortable yoga pants that look like dress pants. They have been on the athleisure, like comfort style game much longer than folks who are newer and getting into it now and being like, hey, I just realized that clothes are uncomfortable. Beta Brand has been making comfortable clothes for a long, long time. I have their dress pant yoga pants and I love them. They have inclusive sizing. They are long enough for me. They have pockets. They have yoga denim as well. It is so good, and they're all so comfortable. So whether you're going to the office, working from home, or running errands, you are going to look chic and feel comfy. So right now, get 30% off your Beta Brand order when you go to betabrand.com/spirits. That's betabrand.com/spirits for 30% off your order for a limited time. Make sure to use that URL because it supports our show and lets them know where you heard about Beta Brand from. Find out why people are buying 5 different pairs of these pants. Go to betabrand.com/spirits today for 30% off.
Amanda, single-use plastic is like a thing that we've been talking about since 2000, right?
Scourge of the earth.
You're like, oh God, terrible. But it is 2022 now, which means it is way past time to make cleaning fun, beautiful, and plastic-free. I actually enjoy cleaning now, which is wild to me because I started using my Blue Land cleaner, and it is simple and beautiful and like just... You buy a bottle once, you refill it forever. There's no more plastic waste. There's no more like trying to figure out where to put the recycling of the plastic bottle that you were using. You just need to discard, instead of the plastic bottle, your outdated idea of what eco-friendly products are. And it means that they're less expensive and more effective with Blue Land. So Blue Land has these stunning high quality forever bottles that start at just $10 when you buy a kit. And they're meant to be used forever with these money-saving refillable tablets that just start at $2. And they come in incredible scents like Iris Agave, which smells incredible, or Lavender Eucalyptus, which seems very up your alley, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, you can get 20% off your first order when you go to blueland.com/spirits. That's 20% off your first order of any Blue Land products at blueland.com/spirits, blueland.com/spirits.
And finally, we are sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. We talk about BetterHelp a lot on the show, and this month we are discussing some of the stigmas around mental health that people run into. I know that before I went to therapy for the first time, it felt like something that I didn't yet merit. Like things weren't bad enough, or it wasn't extreme enough, or, why would I go to therapy if I am getting good grades or making it to work? And I really wish that someone had told me earlier that therapy can be a tool to use before things get bad. It can help you avoid those lows. It is a thing that you can use to maintain and not just kind of like rescue your life when things get bad, but keep things stable and even hopefully looking up. I use BetterHelp every single week to talk to my therapist, whose name is also Amanda. And I love the flexibility that we can use text, phone, or video therapy. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers phone, video, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anybody on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can be matched with a therapist in under 48 hours. So give it a try and see why over 2 million people have used BetterHelp Online Therapy. Once more, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Spirits listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/spirits. That's BetterHelp.com/spirits. We did it, Julia. Our first mega refill. Can't wait to hear more about Demeter. So now let's get back to the show.
So, Amanda, it was great talking to you in the kitchen, but I was trying to think of what the cocktail for Demeter should be this week, right? I figured, let's make a cocktail that's really earthy, something herbal with bitters. That's usually my go-to. But then I was thinking a little bit more about it. And honestly, I think Demeter would be more of a whiskey woman.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of grain.
Yeah, like she's the goddess of agriculture and cereals and grains. She probably likes something like a rye. She'd probably like Sazerac or maybe a Manhattan. So I found this cocktail that Jake loved when I made it for him, and it's called the Trinidad Sour. So it is rye whiskey, bitters naturally, and a bit of lemon juice, and then these really great almondy notes that come from orgeat syrup. If you've ever had like tiki drinks, usually they kind of add some orgeat that like adds a sort of nuttiness, and that was kind of what I was looking for a kind of a toasted Demeter inspired drink.
I love the idea of her like on the threshing floor, like in the building where the grain is stored, like hanging out between silos and having like a little cask of whiskey that she's aging.
Oh man, I love that so much. Now I'm trying to decide if I had to assign a type of alcohol to each of the gods, what would it be?
Ooh.
And like Demeter absolutely like whiskey, 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
Throw out me some alcohol ideas and I will throw back at you the first god that comes to my head.
Okay, gin.
Athena.
Okay. I love it. How about vodka?
I feel like that's either a Hera or an Artemis. I think I'm leaning more towards Hera.
I like that. How about tequila?
Tequila is a party drink. I'm going to go with Dionysus.
That sounds like it makes sense. How about brandy?
Brandy. Oh, that's like, I feel like brandy's like fancy ass motherfucker. And I feel like that's what Zeus drinks when he's sitting on Olympus.
Yeah, I can see his little decanter next to him and like a brandy boy. How about rum?
Rum. Poseidon. 100%.
Okay, makes total sense. What other liquors are there?
I know, right? It's hard to think of liquors.
Whiskey, rum, gin, tequila, vodka. I think those are the most prominent ones.
Yeah. I didn't take too long thinking of those, so they're pretty solid in my head, I feel like.
Hey, everybody, pause the show right now and text a friend. Quick lightning round. What Greek god, personifies these liquors, and see what you get.
Yeah, and let us know the results, because now I'm curious.
And let the friend know about Spirits Podcast.
Yes,
Come on.
a good way of letting a friend know about the show. So with these Trinidad Sours in our hands, Amanda, to keep us warm, let's revisit the story of Persephone and Hades. I feel like the last time we talked about this story in depth, we focused very much on Persephone and Hades rather than like what Demeter was going through when her daughter was stolen away by the god of the underworld.
Yeah.
So before the abduction, Persephone was known as Kore, or the Maiden, and she lived with Demeter on the surface of the earth. The two of them were actually often worshipped together. Again, it's something we'll talk about a little bit later. But sometimes they were just referred to as the goddesses and called the older and the younger in order to distinguish. Which is very cute, but also like kind of difficult if you don't have the best relationship with your mother. I'm like, I don't want to just be the younger version of you.
I was just going to think, like, we are two 29-year-old women, and I can think of nothing more fraught than referring to any woman I know as the younger or any mom I know as the older. Like, it's not just an age thing either. It's like, this is, a time in my life where I'm thinking a lot about differentiation from my parents and what it means to be a human unit in the world. And, Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah, no. Luckily, I think Persephone and Demeter probably had a better relationship with each other, and so probably didn't have a problem with being referred to as the older and the younger.
I mean, also, let's think about the origin of these gods. What a like metaphorically rich thing to have, right? It's like a mother-daughter goddess pair.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about the fact that they're often shown as a triple goddess, where like Kore is the maiden, Demeter is the mother, and then you have Hecate as the like crone aspect, that also kind of plays very heavily into this. So when Persephone was taken, it was because her father Zeus had given Hades permission, but obviously don't tell the mother of your daughter about that. Just let her think, oh, my child has been taken and I don't know where she is.
Yeah, it feels like even Zeus should know that.
Yeah, you would think, but he was probably like, oh no, she'll just get mad, so I'm not gonna tell her. You can't do that, bud. You just can't. Poor Demeter wanders the earth, never tiring, and is so preoccupied with her grief that the seasons halt, living things cease to grow, and all living things begin to slowly die.
And like, I know we've touched on it before, but man, what a metaphor for grief.
Oh yeah, bud. Mm-hmm. Sure is. I was going to say, luckily Zeus can foresee things happening, but no, he does realize pretty quickly that this is going to threaten all life on Earth. So he sends Hermes, who is the emissary between the underworld and the gods, to go fetch Persephone and bring her home. However, as we know, while Persephone was in the underworld, she had eaten a few pomegranate seeds, which bound her to the underworld for a certain amount of months every year. Interestingly, this time, reading through a few of the different sources, not all of them say that this period of time is fall and winter, but rather it might have been a reference to the dry Mediterranean summer where plant life goes through a drought instead of like the bleak desolation of winter.
And I understand why that would be a little more alarming to Zeus than this happening during fall and winter, which, more expected.
Yeah, but I just really like the idea of seeing a different period than we normally see. Like, for those of you who've played the Hades video game, Demeter is symbolized by a lot of frost powers, which I think is really fun and really interesting. But the idea of like drought and that kind of like dead grass in the middle of summer heat also is extremely intense, and I love that a lot.
I love that too.
Another super interesting thing that I found upon revisiting this myth was that Demeter would, in some versions, actually descend into the underworld herself to fetch Persephone and bring her back to the surface, both the original time and every time since then, which I think is extremely important when we're going to look at some of the stuff later with Demeter. This journey to go get her daughter is a huge part of the Elozinian Mysteries, which, again, we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the return of Persephone to Demeter is also tied to the harvest, obviously. So it was said that at the beginning of autumn, when the old crop was laid on the field to act as fertilizer for the new crop, that was Persephone returning back to Demeter, and that was like basically the old crop meeting the new crop.
Incredible.
Isn't that so great? I love that so much. It's just beautiful imagery. And again, coming back to Demeter, the compost goddess, which I am in love with.
Oh man, I want to like go sniff some compost right now.
I know, right? Like I just want to like lay in some hay or something like that.
I know.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking about a thing that I learned recently, which obviously I'm not a farmer and I didn't grow up on farms. I didn't realize that hay has to cure. And when it does so, it goes through like a thermodynamic process. So it actually like heats up. So you have to be really careful when you're curing hay because it could like catch on fire. Wild to me.
No, it is powerful shit.
Yeah. Hey. It's powerful shit. Stories of Persephone weren't the only ones that Demeter was featured in. Like, I don't want people to think like, oh yeah, Demeter, she kind of one note. She just only cares about her daughter. That's not it. Like all of the gods, Demeter was prone to exacting revenge on those who wronged her.
Fuck yeah, dude.
Not as much as everyone else, but like a decent amount. So one of these tales involved the king of Thessaly, whose name was Erysichthon. So he ordered all of the trees in one of Demeter's groves to be cut down. I don't remember why. He just decided that was a thing he wanted to do one day.
I was going to ask, and then I was like, I'm not going to know. But people just do that all the time.
Yeah. Unfortunately, one of the trees in that grove actually held the like votives and prayers that Demeter had granted to the people of that city.
Come on.
Luckily, the workers knew better than to cut that tree down in particular. And in his frustration, retaliation, the king took up the axe himself and struck the tree. In doing so, he killed the dryad who inhabited that tree, and with her dying breath, she called to Demeter to curse the king.
I know that this is completely historically inaccurate, but I just want to say that king hates unions. Like, that's hating unions energy.
Yeah, he was a real scab there.
Yeah.
Do you want to guess what Demeter cursed the king with?
Just like infertility, baby?
That would be a good one, and it would like align with her whole thing. That's not it though. She instead called upon the spirit of unrelenting hunger, whose name is Limos, and Limos entered the king's stomach so that the king, no matter how much he ate, only grew hungrier and sold all of his possessions to try to buy more food.
Oh my.
So he lost all of his belongings, he lost all of his loved ones, and unable to satiate his own hunger, ends up eating himself.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's a hardcore.
Yeah, he deserved it.
I feel like Demeter is a real, doesn't yell a lot, but when she does, it's like she means it, or like doesn't get angry that often, but when she does, she really means it. And I respect that.
Yeah. She's hardcore. She's hardcore, but in the best way.
She doesn't curse people often, but when she does, it's horrifying.
Exactly. So another story of Demeter's revenge happened when she was searching for Persephone after she had been taken, because she wandered the earth and got up to a bunch of shit. So at one point she arrived in the land of Attica, just fully exhausted because she'd been traveling for so long. And she asked a woman named Minte for a drink. So Minte offered her barley water, which is similar to a story that we'll talk about later and also important to the worship of Demeter. And so Demeter, in the heat of the day and in her thirst, kind of like drank the water very clumsily, spilling it on herself as she was trying to gulp it down. And the woman's son, who was also there at the time, his name was Escalabus. He laughed at her in that moment and mocked her in a real, like, you know when people, like, you spill a little something on yourself and they're like, haha, first day drinking? And you're like, go fuck yourself, my guy.
If anyone said that to me, I would give them a withering stare and say, what a strange thing to say to a stranger.
No one ever did that to you as a child? I feel like that was like
No.
a joke that people would make all the time. Like, first date drinking? You're like, no, motherfucker.
No, I would just like get ashamed and punish myself.
Wrong. No. Bad. So Demeter, much like you, did not take that shit. And so she stood, she poured the remaining drink over him and turned him into a gecko.
Yeah.
And it was said that Demeter favors those who kill geckos because they remind her of that man's mockery.
Okay, but geckos are super cute.
Yes, apparently the Greeks didn't like geckos. I don't know why,
Oh,
but
fascinating.
Greeks not a fan of geckos. The final tale of revenge that I'll tell you is the story of Minte, who was said to be the mistress of Hades before he took Persephone to be his bride. So Minte would often brag, even though she was no longer a mistress of the Lord of the Underworld, that she was more beautiful than the new queen and that it wouldn't be long before Hades took her back.
Deeply, deeply understandable behavior.
Yes, obviously. Totally fine. So Demeter, upon hearing this and loving her daughter a whole lot, trampled the nymph to death.
Oh, okay.
And from the earth, a sweet-smelling herb grew, and that is where mint came from.
Oh, no.
So next time you have mint in a cocktail or in like a recipe or something, be like, this is a dead nymph.
You know, the one thing I have never been able to keep alive is mint, actually. I have a very tough time growing it. It doesn't grow well indoors, and at least the plants I get here in the city will often have fruit flies that infect my other plants. So that's the one thing that I've like outlawed from my home, and it makes sense.
Mint is also like very invasive. Like it'll run wild if you plant it outdoors and it'll take over all your other plants if you're not careful about it. So
Yeah. Like jealousy?
yes. Yes. I'm with you here. We'll do it. We'll take it.
Green-eyed, minty Chloe.
Oh, Minty Chloe is very funny. Okay. So Demeter, not only vengeful, though. She's not like some of those other gods where it's like all the stories are about revenge. There were many times where she gave her favors as well. So in her wanderings, for instance, she came across a town known as Phineas. The people of the town welcomed her warmly, despite not knowing that she was a goddess, and they offered her all sorts of grains, like, you know, rye and spelt and all that, except for beans, which they said were too impure to give to a guest.
Oh, okay.
So when she revealed who she was, 2 of the townspeople built a temple for her, being like, oh my god, we were blessed by the goddess. And in her thanks, she gifted them the fig tree.
Yay.
Which is a good gift. I like that.
That's a great gift. I have 2. I love fig trees.
Do your fig trees actually like flower and fruit?
They're not mature enough, no.
recently we were looking at houses, and one of the houses had like a huge fig tree in the backyard that like we went to go see it towards like the middle of fall. So it was like just fruiting and a lot of the fruits were like there. I'm like, I can't just eat figs off of these people's fig tree, even though they don't live here anymore. But it was very tempting. I was like, this is also how I get stolen by the Fae or have to spend time in the underworld. So we won't do that.
I know. Part of me is saying do it, and then part of me is like, don't eat the fairy fruit, Julia.
For the best that I didn't eat those. So a great gift of a fig tree. But there was also Triptolemus, who was the son of the king of Eleusis. So he was actually nursed by Demeter after she saw that as an infant that he was sick. And he immediately just regained his strength and in the blink of an eye also became an adult, like a fully grown man.
Wow.
Yeah, which I guess, you know, the breast milk of a goddess, that'll do it.
It's a real reverse Benjamin Button situation, as we call it here, aka aging.
Aging, but fast.
But fast.
So she chose the man to teach the art of agriculture to the rest of the world. And from him, the rest of Greece was said to learn how to plant and reap crops. So Demeter also gave him her serpent-drawn chariot, which I fucking love. Serpent-drawn carriage. I love that. So cool. Chariot. Awesome. And so she asked him to scatter her sacred seeds across the earth, which is very cool.
That's a much better idea than the Johnny Appleseed myth. I'm trying to think of the logistics of a serpent-drawn carriage, but I kind of don't care. Like, I love those little ground dwellers. Like, that makes total sense.
I feel like it's almost like a Eastern dragon kind of situation where they just like wiggle and fly through the air.
Oh, yeah. No, I was also picturing them flying through the air. I don't know why or how, but I'm into it.
No, I just feel like if it's a chariot of the gods, it probably flies.
Totally.
So unfortunately, while he was basically spreading the sacred seed of Demeter across the world, he landed to rest in the kingdom of a man named Lyncus. And the king there found out what his like mission was and was like, all right, cool. And so he waited for him to fall asleep and then he attacked him because he wanted to get credit for teaching everyone agriculture.
No, come on.
However, Demeter saw what was happening and she had been looking over Triptolemus, and in the last moment she turned Lyncus into a lynx and then returned Triptolemus home.
Not a bad outcome considering all that happened.
Yeah. And I mean, lynxes are cool. I like a lynx.
They're very cool. I love those big old paws, those big old tails.
Yeah, they're cute. I like them. They're like little furry boys.
Yeah, they're all out of proportion, and I find that adorable.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like when proportions are weird, you're like, it's either creepy or adorable, and it could go either way.
Yeah, they have real kitten proportions, which I find so cute.
So, Amanda, let's talk about festivals, which has slowly also become one of my favorite parts of these episodes. So before Demeter found where Persephone had been taken, and she had traveled the earth to search for her, like I mentioned. While she was searching in disguise so that like no mortal would know her, she came across the palace of the king of Eleusis. So in this city, she took the appearance of an elderly woman and she sat by the city well.
Love it.
If you want like the hot gossip, the well is like the water cooler of the Greek world.
I love the disguised as an old person waiting by the well. It's my favorite trick.
Classic. So while she was there, she was approached by 4 young women who asked her what she was doing there. She told them this buck wild story about how she had been fleeing from pirates and that she had escaped, but now she found herself in the city where she knew no one, which I was just like, that's a buck wild lie. Demeter, what?
I mean, is there anything more fun than lying to a stranger, though? Like, I totally get it.
Yeah, no, you're right. Lying to strangers is fun. So the young women hear this story. They're very like impressed, but also feel bad for her. And so they return to their mother and they tell her the story. And the woman invites Demeter into her home. When she enters the home, she begins to kind of bring with her this divine light. And the matron of the home quickly is like, something up with this lady. Here's my best wine. Do you want some? And Demeter tells her no, she doesn't want the wine. And so instead, she offers her a cup of barley water.
There you go.
Again, the barley water, which is a sacred drink that would be given to worshippers in the city of Eleusis. So this refreshed Demeter, and she blessed the woman's youngest child, her son, with immortal youth, which is great. However, this required her to anoint the child with ambrosia and then lay him in the hot flames of a hearth so that his mortality would be burned away.
Oh my.
So when the mother saw that this is what this old woman was doing to her child, she screamed. because that's what you would do normally. That's not a wild thing.
No, so would I.
And also because Demeter didn't tell her what she was doing. She wasn't like, I'm going to make your child immortal. She was just like, here, Ambrosia, throw the child in the fire.
Like a rom-com, Julia, a quick check-in would solve almost all plot problems here,
Yes.
and therefore it never happens in Greek myth.
Exactly. So Demeter is angered that this mortal thought that she would like even think about harming a child. And so she cast him out of the hearth, which didn't complete the ritual. So this kid not immortal forever or anything like that.
Damn.
She then showed herself in her full divinity, quote, beauty breathed about her and a lovely fragrance. Light shone from her so that the great house was filled with brightness. Which is
wow,
beautiful. I love the idea. It's like, I show my divinity and also it smells real nice in here all of a sudden. And so Demeter demanded that the woman build a great temple for her near the town in order to win back her favor.
I mean, this is a hell of a thing to happen when your kids are just like in town and go to the well and they're like, what are you doing here, lady? And then fast forward 6 months and you're suddenly building a temple for a goddess who visited you and without your permission tried to make your son a god.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a bit of a wild turn of events.
Yeah.
So the woman went to the king and told him what the goddess had demanded, and the temple was built willingly. Like the king was like, yes, all right, excellent. We should build a temple for this goddess. I 100% agree.
I have to say, all these mortals are making the right decision here, Jules.
Yes, exactly. So when it was completed, Demeter came to it as her throne away from the other Olympians, like not on Olympus. And it was the place that she could come to in her grief at her missing daughter, which I think is really beautiful. Like a way of like getting away from everyone else and just being able to sit in your own grief and feel your own feelings.
Totally.
So it was out of this temple that the Elozinian Mysteries were held. So they kind of featured, as one would imagine, after the abduction of Persephone and Hades, they were a cycle of 3 phases, which were the descent, the search, and the ascent.
This is stirring up media studies memories in my brain.
As it should. So by celebrating in this cycle, mortals were able to continue the eternal flow of life from generation to generation, allowing them to be rewarded in the afterlife. That was the like basic principle of like, if you participate in the Elozinian Mysteries, this is what you get out of it.
Hell yeah.
So during the actual mysteries themselves, there would be a feast, and I'm going to break it down like day by day because it was like a 10-day thing. There was a feast during which 2 priests would fill these 2 vessels of water and then pour them out, one to the east and one to the west. Similar to the story that we mentioned before, a child would also be initiated from the hearth, though what that meant exactly is one of the things that was kind of lost through time because this was a very secretive practice. And apparently the height of the celebration was an ear of grain cut in silence, which was said to represent new life. But beyond that, there's no other information. That's the only line you can really find. It's just an ear of grain cut in silence. You're like, what does that mean, though?
Incredible.
So the Elozinian Mysteries could also be divided between the greater and the lesser mysteries. So the lesser mysteries took place in the middle of winter, usually around February or March. And this was where like a piglet was sacrificed to Demeter and Persephone, and then worshippers would purify themselves in the river. Not like super exciting stuff, but participating in the lesser mysteries, that's what qualified worshippers to be a part of the greater mysteries.
Okay, because I was going to say, who is like, nah, I'm fine with the lesser mysteries. Don't worry about it.
No, because the greater mysteries are fun. Like I said, they lasted 10 days. It ran in late summer, usually like late September, early October, typically.
I mean, a perfect time for a mystery. God.
Exactly. So first, the sacred items were brought to the temple. Again, a lot of this is going to be vague because a lot of the stuff was lost through time because it was a very secretive practice.
Oh, that makes it much more fun. Don't worry about it.
Okay, great. So the sacred items were brought to the temple. The next day, the priests gathered to declare the start of the rites and then carried out a sacrifice of some kind.
Yep.
On the 3rd day, some celebrants would wash themselves in the sea in anticipation for the rest of the rituals. The 4th day was a kind of festival within a festival, and it centered on Asclepios, who you might remember was the healer son of Apollo, who was so good that he could heal the dead. Yeah, and then they were like, you can't keep doing that, so they killed him. That night, there was then a feast that was supposed to last all night, like sunset to sunrise. And then the next day, which was the 5th day, was the sacred walk to the temple of Eleusis, which they would take a path that was just basically called the Sacred Way, and worshippers would swing branches that were called bakoi. Also, during this walk, which is my favorite part, there was a point at which the worshippers would shout dirty jokes and obscenities.
Oh, wow.
because this was to honor Eambi, who was basically an old woman who was able to make Demeter smile even in her grief over losing Persephone by telling her dirty jokes.
Oh, fuck yeah, man.
I love that so much. That makes me so happy. Just like, yes, we've hit the point. Now everyone tell your dirtiest jokes.
Yes, when we crest the hill, let a real one rip.
No fart jokes. Only sexy jokes.
Fart jokes are the easy kind. Push yourself, Bob.
So when they finally arrive at the temple, there is an all-night vigil, which was meant to represent Demeter's search for Persephone. Worshippers would also imbibe that barley water drink that we talked about, which some scholars believe might have also had like a psychotropic element, like they added some sort of psychotropic mushroom or something like that.
Interesting.
Again, not everyone believes that, but some scholars do, and I'm just sharing that information with all of you. On the next day, the initiates to the mysteries were brought into the telesterion, which was a great hall within the temple. And within there was a dramatic reenactment of the Demeter and Persephone myth, like a whole like play situation. The sacred items were then displayed, and then the initiates were taught the purpose of those sacred items. So these 3 stages were called the unrepeatables, because if someone initiated into the mysteries revealed them, they would be punished by death.
This is the most theater kid shit I've ever heard. I'm so into it.
It's extremely metal. I'm here for it.
Anyone who has read like Tana French or Donna Tartt books about like 2 intense liberal arts students living together in college, someone needs to do some kind of like inspired by novel based on this shit.
Yeah. What was that one called?
The Secret History is kind of the most read one of this. Yeah.
Yeah. That one was fucking buck wild. Everyone's like, oh yeah, dark academia. And then you're like, the one character just does fucking like coke in a Burger King parking lot. What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's a real bacchanalia in New England vibe that teens are very into now.
Yeah, the teens really like the dark academia now.
They do.
Damn Tumblr. So on the final day, the priests would reveal visions that were said to have been sent to them by the goddesses. And then there was one final all-night feast that was thrown, which was accompanied by dancing and revelry. Finally, a bull would be sacrificed the morning after the feast, and the dead were honored again by pouring drink over the ground, both to the west and to the east.
Right on.
And then that's it. Everyone went home.
I mean, I love that.
Yeah. That's a fun, like, 10-day adventure, I feel like. Most of that's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, we're recording this in the days before Christmas and the New Year when nothing really is happening. And it is kind of like a 10-day period of like rest. And, you know, for many of us, even if we want to be working, no one else is working. So it's like, I don't know. Just the idea of like a 10-day thing where you get to see all of your neighbors doing all of this shit, it really appeals to me right now.
Yeah. We should have more celebrations like during this period of time that everyone participates in.
All of us can agree that the solstice is a good time to focus on, you know, light and fun shit.
Hey, fuck yeah, dog. So that was what we know about the Elozinian Mysteries. Not everything we know, but a good summary for you and the listeners. And as we've mentioned before, Demeter was also worshipped with the Thesmophoria, which also worshipped Persephone as well. So it was held during late autumn when the seeds were sown in the fields, and it celebrated human and agricultural fertility.
Right on.
Like we mentioned, only married adult women were welcome to celebrate in the festival. And for some, observing the rites was actually used as a form of proof of marriage, which is kind of fun. I like that.
Yeah.
And again, because Demeter was the goddess of sacred law, that makes a lot of sense as well. So depending on where it was being celebrated, the time of year was slightly different. However, for the Athenians, it was celebrated in late October and for 3 full days. And I feel like I mentioned this in the Poseidon episode, but the festival also featured eating cakes that were baked in the shape of sexual organs. Fun. Love that.
Greeks knew how to have fun. Yep.
And they also, similarly to the mysteries, sacrificed pigs. I think it's just like that's an animal that farmers would have, and therefore that's what you would sacrifice.
Useful, you know, precious.
Yeah. On the second day, however, it was a day of fasting, kind of to honor the mourning of Demeter, who after she lost Persephone.
Maybe also you're hungover, who can say?
Or who can say, yeah. Well, I feel like you would want food after being hungover. You know what I mean?
Yeah, or you really like, you gorge yourself and then you're sated. You're like, nah, I can take a day off. Well, let's prepare for day 3.
Yes, exactly. Like after Thanksgiving, like you don't really want to eat that much after Thanksgiving. So, and finally on the third day, that was when the women would call upon the goddesses to pray for their own fertility, which was supposed to represent the return of Persephone. which I think is really nice.
Love a multi-day festival. Not enough of those.
We do. We love a multi-day festival. Too few holidays nowadays are multi-day, mostly because our holidays have been cut down by like corporate greed and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just wish we had more like multi-day festivals where it's like, oh man, block out those 10 days. Here we go. We're celebrating. I know like Hanukkah is like a great example of that like multi-day festival still, but
yeah, lots of multi-day festivals in Judaism, but not enough in Christianity.
Not enough in Christianity.
Need more secular multi-day holidays. That's what we've really decided.
Please, just stop giving us long weekends. Give us things in the middle of the week.
Then I have to do my weekend shit, and I have a day off, and probably my employer expects me to answer email anyway. God.
Screw that. More Greek calendar stuff, in my opinion. I know a lot of our listeners were like, you guys really should make that calendar of all the Greek festivals and stuff like that. I will. I'm not going to sell it to you guys. Like, I'll just make it into like a Google calendar that we can share with you. I'm not going to make you guys buy things that are free on the internet. That's ridiculous.
Let's work on that. We can do some kind of 2022 conspirators quietly observe ancient Greek holidays as self-care rituals.
Like Bean Day and Bear Day.
These are all great. Dress your little girl in a toga day.
Mm-hmm. I love it. Well, that is all I've got for Demeter. I love her a whole lot. I feel bad that so much of her stories are basically like, I was mourning my daughter and then some other shit happened. But I am glad that we get to talk about her because she was extremely important to ancient Greece, and her worship like really does kind of give us a great insight on what the Greeks found important in day-to-day life.
Not least of all because barley water is just one step from barley wine, one of my favorite drinks of all time.
That is a really good beer style. I'm a big fan of that. Damn right.
Julia, thank you so much for taking us through the goddess of compost. I am going to bring goddess of compost energy to 2022 because truly we're all living in a dumpster fire, but let's see what we can make of it, you know?
Yeah. And Amanda, you bring that goddess of compost energy, and just remember to stay creepy.
Stay cool. Spirits was created by Amanda McLaughlin, Julia Schaffini, and Eric Schneider, with music by Kevin MacLeod and visual design by Allison Wakeman.
Keep up with all things creepy and cool by following us at Spirits Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Tumblr. We also have all of our episode transcripts, guest appearances, and merch on our website, as well as a form to send us in your urban legends and your advice from folklore questions at spiritspodcast.com.
Join our member community on Patreon, patreon.com/spiritspodcast, for all kinds of behind-the-scenes goodies. Just $1 gets you access to audio extras with so much more, like recipe cards, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic, for every single episode, director's commentaries, real physical gifts, and more.
We are a founding member of Multitude, an independent podcast collective and production studio. If you like spirits, you will love the other shows that live on our website at multitude.productions.
Above all else, if you liked what you heard today, please text one friend about us. That's the very best way to help keep us growing.
Thanks for listening to Spirits. We'll see you next week.
Bye.